So I have my blank. The blank is dry. I haven't done anything to it. It's been wrapped. The number is my numbering system. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my mandrel and I'm going to check to see that it goes to the line or slightly beyond the line. Knowing that when I soak it, it's going to shrink a little bit or swell up on the inside so that it may not fit on my buccal. So I'm going to do a little bit of reaming while it's dry. And I'm going to use a diamond reamer just to smooth the inside. Check it one more time. Goes a little bit beyond, which is what I want. I'm going to check my wires. All I want my wires to be is snug. This one's wiggling a little bit, so I'm going to pull it just a tiny bit and tighten it. I'm also going to make sure that all my wires are where they're supposed to be. So I'm going to move this one up just a tiny bit so that it's on top of my mark. Put this back. Then the next thing I'm going to do is just lightly sand and define in the collar area. We sometimes see little fibers here that the profiler doesn't catch. So I'm going to take a little bit off there. I'm going to take the rails down just a tiny bit because I know that I'm going to want that to happen. And this area right here in the center, it tends to be rounded because of the way the profiler works. So I'm going to just use a flat file and take off a little bit of that, which will work the channels. So we'll use sandpaper to begin with and just lightly sand, rolling my sandpaper over my thumb or my finger. I'm not really trying to change it, I just want it to be smooth. So it's smooth to the touch. Now I'm going to take my flat file and I'm going to use my bench. So I'm going to just rest the file. So I'm doing a couple passes in the center, and then I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, tip it, do the same thing in the center, and then the edges, 1, 2, 3, and then I'll do the same on this other side. I'm pushing it back to the collar for the click. I've got a little bit of a ridge on this side, so I'm just going to knock that off so that it's smooth. At this point, I'm going to measure to clip the tip, and it looks like my collar is fairly even. I add an extra millimeter, so I always cut mine at 29. So I'm going to mark that, and then soak the reed. Do use a tip profiler. So I'm going to cut this reed and let the water get on the inside of the blades with a tip cutter. Always push down, hold it, move the reed away before releasing the blade so that it doesn't pull up and break the blade. Now on this particular one, even if I soak it, you can see that the tip is very close, so I will need to adjust the wires a little bit. So I'm going to open the first wire a little bit. I'm doing it a little bit off center because it looks like it wants to open a little bit off center, but I have a nice opening now, nice and even. So now we'll use the tip profiler. Push it tight on the mandrel. Be very careful about guiding it on. Tighten the screw. Start way over on the edge. And you'll do the same on the other side. Okay, so now I've done the tip profile and my reed is already starting to open. I just tried it, works pretty well. It seems like it might be a little bit soft, the cane, so I'm going to try to do each step, but I'm only going to do a tiny bit because I don't want to do too much. So I can see that my tip opens pretty well. My reed, the shape, the taper of my reed looks pretty good here. So I'm going to begin by doing a slight wedge on the very front of the reed. So I'm going to start about 1 millimeter or 2 back, and I'm going to count and watch where the knife takes off the cane. I'm listening for the click. Try to use equal pressure. Be careful at the corners. At this stage, when I look at the reed this way, from the side I'm looking this way, I should see a little bit of an angle at the very tip, off the tip, which I do. And if I were to hold it up to the light, I'm going to see some kind of light area, a line on the top. Now to smooth out that I've just done, I'm going to put a little chisel edge. Because this reed is soft, I'm not going to do too much. So basically I hold it at about a 25-degree angle. I'm going to put my finger so that it's over the end of the blade, and I'm going to gently sand, just pulling one way. So I think because it seems a little soft, I'm going to do 3 and 5. And then when I do the edges, I kind of pull this way just a little bit. Try not to tip the reed, keep the reed flat. If I feel the sandpaper on my fingertip, that means that the angle of the reed is too large. So now I've smoothed off. I don't see the ridge anymore on my reed. And I'm looking with my colored plaque, and my corners are still intact. So I don't see anything missing. At this point, you may want to mark the center of your reed, which you could measure if you wish. The center of these blanks on the tip is about 8.5 millimeters. So right there. So I've added, I have a center mark, and I can even look and put my other center in. So I have two centers. I know my reed is slightly long, so I'm going to measure to find 9, which will be where my triangle will begin. So there's 9. I can make a mark here. So that's where my 9 mark is, suspecting that I'll cut some off. So if I have an even triangle that goes here, so we can see, hold that up so you can see the even triangle. I'm going to go about 3 millimeters down, which is not quite half. And I'm going to make another line. So these are basically the areas that I'm going to scrape. You can do this a lot of different ways. I prefer to do it without a plaque and use a knife, and I count every stroke that I make. So I'm going to use my heavier knife. I have 2 knives that I like to use, one that's lighter weight for finishing and one that's a little heavier to get things started. So I'm not pressing down, I'm just letting the weight of the knife do the work. So if I take I'm going to count. So that's my first angle. I'll do the same on the other side. I'm trying to keep from cutting in the center. And I'm using my thumb that's holding the reed as a guide for my knife. If we look at this with the red plaque now, we can kind of see that there's some red coming through. So the next one I'm going to do, we'll start where the triangle mark is, and I'm going to blend across the previous line. And the same on the other side. If you have a narrower shape, these angles will be slightly different. A narrower shape, you might have shallower triangles. Okay. So now I have squeezed my reed shut a little bit, so I'm going to open it back up. I have a pretty good crow. The shape, so you can see through it. There is a triangle there. So the last bit that I'm going to do here, 2 more things. So as I look at the rails, the red plaque will make it most obvious. I will probably clip the end off, so if there's any messiness from my scraping, I just trim a tiny bit off the end. So right here, my rails are a little bit thick. So I'm going to blend using a knife. I'm going to start below my 8 millimeter line here, and I'm going to scrape just up and a little bit around, so I'm getting this area right in here along the edge. My reed closes quite well. Not sure if we'll be able to see that, but it's closing edges to center. I am going to trim a little bit off because the pitch of the crow is low, which tells me that the reed is perhaps a little bit soft. I'm going to blend. We did this with a knife right here.